Good evening. On behalf of the City of Rochester, I'd like to welcome you to the community input session for the police chief search. I'm Gary Peterson. My firm, Public Sector Search and Consulting, been hired by the city to assist in the search and selection process for the next police chief. Our firm strongly believes in an open and transparent search and selection process. Over the past 4 years, we've helped more than 40 different cities or entities with their search for their next chief and the subsequent selection process, including several cities in New York State, Albany, Syracuse, Beacon, Long Beach, and currently assisting the MTA, which serves New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut in their search for their next police chief as well. The City of Rochester Mayor Malik D has authorized an improved community engagement plan that includes these input sessions, smaller focus groups, a community survey, and police department survey to get input from as many people as possible on the attributes, characteristics, qualities, and things we need the next chief to do to be successful. Just by way of an update, the community survey, we've had 769 responses thus far. And the police department survey, we've had 200 responses. And like I said, we want to hear many different voices. So while we have numerous people on this particular forum, a couple of the previous had less people, but we attributed that to more people taking the survey. Just want to get your voice heard. And so we really want to find out who can, so we can recruit candidates and who can address the challenges and issues this community faces. So like I said, some of the other meetings have already taken place. In fact, the two forums that have taken place before this one were on February 2nd and then February 4th. And we have one last forum on February 10th, that's Thursday at 6 p.m. So if you have friends or family who have not had an opportunity to take the survey or be in another forum, please encourage them to participate. We found a pretty good participation throughout this process, and it's a testament to the community in Rochester and how important this is to you guys. And I want to make sure you guys are heard. And so what is this forum all about and what's going to happen with the information? Because I know that's what a lot of people want to know. And so the input that you're providing tonight and has been provided in the previous forums and the small groups and the survey are used to help develop the position profile, which describes the desired attributes, qualities, and characteristics and skills needed to be successful in the position. It describes what success looks like and the opportunities and challenges of the position. And your collective input will help shape that profile. Tonight, if you don't want to speak, you just want to listen to the conversations, that's totally fine. But please take the survey if you haven't. Before we start, I'd like to briefly talk about a couple of guidelines that will help us have a productive session. We have about 90 minutes for the entire session, so I'll try to be brief. This is not a city council meeting, so you don't get a prescribed amount of time to talk. We're going to have conversations so that we get input from everyone. I want to make sure everyone's voice is heard. And I'm gonna moderate the event and ask questions to prompt the conversation as needed. Please make sure that you're muted and use the raise your hand feature. And Barbara Pierce, the city's communication director, is just waved. She's the co-host tonight, and she'll let you know when it's your turn to share your perspective. When Barbara calls on you, please unmute and then you can be heard. Feel free to provide your name and where you live if you want to. You're not required to, and whether you're a business owner, a resident, or a visitor. But again, not required to speak. None of those are required. Last, I'm confident everyone will be respectful tonight of everyone else's perspective, because many members have different perspectives than other members of the community. And so we want to make sure that everyone gets heard. And when people are respectful that way, it really helps other people understand. So with that said, we're going to begin, and I'll pose the first question. That'll help inform the brochure and the position profile. So what qualities, characteristics, and skills do you think are needed for the next police chief to be successful in the city of Rochester as the police chief?
So you can raise your hand using the Zoom hand, or you can literally raise your hand, and I'll try to keep an eye out for folks who'd like to speak.
Thanks, Barbara.
Oh, Isaiah.
Hi, Isaiah.
Hello, can you guys hear me all right?
We can.
All right, what I believe that is needed in order to be successful as a police chief and as we move along, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Isaiah. I'm 17 years old. I go to School of the Arts. I'm a senior. So what I think is needed right now more than ever is a time to revitalize the trust between the community and our police. I feel like through the years we have seen a lot, in our politics, and not only adults but also youth. We have seen a lot in our politics that can kind of kill the trust that we have, in our political figures and our people who are in these seats that control what happens. And I think that sometimes, it becomes killed, the trust, and it never becomes revitalized, but we expect a different outcome. Right. So right now there's an equation that we're expecting a 30, we're expecting the equation to equal 30, but we're only given 5 plus 5. It's never going to add up to 30.
Right.
So I think that there's necessary steps that we have to go along with. If we plan to make Rochester a better place, we really need to revitalize the trust between the community and our police chief and our police altogether. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaiah. And if I could ask you, just from your view, as a 17-year-old living in Rochester, getting ready to graduate from high school, presumably, what are those steps? What would you like to see?
So luckily, in the past year, I've been able to sit at a lot of meetings. I've been able to do a lot of community work. And the other week, I was a part of a forum. I was part of the panel, and I was speaking to RPD, New York State Police, and also the county sheriff. And I was basically there just to kind of tell stories on my view of how a police is, and ways that they could be better. And just sitting there and speaking and seeing that they were listening, I mean, the trust and the respect went from about 0 to 100, because just seeing that they were there and they were ready to listen to become better is really what made the difference. So as we go along, the way that you do that is by having the police chief, having the police there, and not only there because there's something wrong going on, but there just to be there and make connections with our community.
That's great. Thank you very much. So be present, listen to the community, and go where the community's at, right? Thank you. Okay, other perspectives.
Shirley Thompson, I see your hand up.
Thank you. My husband, James, is here also.
Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson.
Hey.
Hi. I'd like a police chief who comes in with the mindset that he or she would like to put the police out of business, that he or she would like to help develop a community that has enough resources amongst the citizenry to address most public safety issues. So that means that they would want to support the development and cultivation of individuals in the neighborhoods, to have the kinds of skill sets that would enable them to help address conflict when it arises in their neighborhood. greatly reducing the need for any police presence. And I'd also like someone who has a track record of not only implementing policies intended to support public safety, but actually monitoring policies, because I was in a meeting earlier today and there was agreement that whether it's Rochester or any other major city or institution, we can get very good at creating policies, supposedly implementing policies, and then they fall by the wayside because there's no monitoring. There's inadequate monitoring to make sure that what is supposed to be happening is happening.
So
Reports
follow
get
up,
written, pardon?
follow up, follow through, and accountability.
Yeah. I don't know if you know, Rochester's famous for starting for all kinds of initiatives, but our follow through and our ongoing support, providing resources to continue programs that work, we fall very short on that.
Right. There's a lot of cities are like that have programs, and they don't even evaluate them to see if they actually do work. And it sounds like you said that some of them work and they just aren't supported. So that is important. Thank you.
Sure. Anything you want to?
Nothing right now. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say, Mrs. Thompson, I appreciate and I'm a former police chief in California, and I appreciate the fact that because I had that kind of mentality. I think chiefs should have the mentality to put yourself out of business. You don't need to have so much work because everything is going well in the community, right? And taking those steps to make that happen are really important. So thank you for that. That's very astute observation.
Absolutely. And I'll just add one more thing in terms of implementation of policies and what have you. Perhaps you read the same news I did, that in Minneapolis, where Amir Locke was recently murdered, they had a no-knock policy in place since January 1st, I believe, if I'm recalling correctly. And in that time, here we are getting toward the middle of February, and already 13 no-knock warrants had been issued, despite the fact that there was a policy in place that no knocks would be suspended.
So, and I'll speak to that because I'm actually in talks with Minneapolis around a similar issue. That's true, but I don't know if you heard that the mayor came out, mayor of Minneapolis came out with a moratorium, but he also said that there was some ambiguity to his policy. He purported it to the community like it was there's no no-knock warrants, but in actuality it was unless X, Y, and Z. And so that's not very clear. It's got to be a clear policy that police can understand, community can understand, so we can all follow it. So I appreciate that, though.
Absolutely.
So with the cooperative.
Great feedback. I've had somebody chat me to say that her hand isn't, she can't find her hand
Okay.
to raise her hand. So Patty Singer has a question or comment.
Hi, thank you. I'm a 19th Ward resident. I have been for about 36 years. So I would like to see a police chief who has a very broad view and views. My analogy to this is that policing is to public safety as medicine is to healthcare. So medicine, sometimes we need medicine, but sometimes there are other ways and other things that we need for our problem. Sometimes we need policing, but there are other ways in which we can address the problem. So if somebody views healthcare as only medicine, they miss out. If somebody views public safety as only policing, that's a very short-sighted view. So I would like to have a police chief who knows that sometimes we need policing and many times we'll need something else.
Right.
But we have to have, it's important to have all that range and just somebody who knows when we need medicine and when we need lifestyle.
Right. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
Good point.
Mary has her hand up. You're on mute, Mary.
On mute, Mary. You're still on mute, Mary.
I don't.
There you go. Now we can hear you.
All right. I guess, and the Thompsons are correct. There's a lot of other things besides police. And I hope we have a policeman or a chief that understands and will work with our mayor, work with our citizens to rectify a lot of the problems that have caused all this violence and destruction of so many, especially our young men in the city. And that would be poverty, one of the worst school systems in the United States of America, and also a lack of good jobs. Drugs, the drug world is economic neighborhoods. And these young men really, if they want something, that's where they get their jobs. So I think we're all to blame if we just find one factor and blame that one entity for all the problems. There's a lot of problems. We have to have law and order, but we cannot allow what has happened to our young men in this city, or we all have blood on our hands. I mean, they're dying on every corner.
So Mary, let me just ask you, because we're getting a little bit far afield. What personal qualities and characteristics, skills do you think the chief needs?
Well, he needs to, first of all, he needs to have compassion.
Okay.
He needs law and order. We have to have law and order. We have no society. I don't like police when I'm speeding and I see that rug bubble behind me. I don't like them, but we need law and order. So we need those two, but we need someone, and trust me, I worked with some of the finest police in my neighborhood. They were wonderful.
Okay.
And that they understand that our people are, especially our young men, are hurting. And while he does his job, he's aware of that. And that's where the compassion comes in. And maybe our new mayor gives me a lot of hope, but it's going to take all of us.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
That's great. And he or she. So
He or she.
okay, thank
We
you.
have some great people. I could give you my short list right now.
Okay, thank you.
So Gary, there's a comment tied to this that Mrs. Thompson added and work with the Police Accountability Board. That's
Okay.
in the chat.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
And we've got Heaven Vega with her hand up.
Hi, I'm Heaven Vega. I go to School Without Walls in 15. The question that you guys asked, I feel that our next or new police chief should have accountability for his team if they were to do something wrong. I feel like they should have trust not only within the I guess you could say the station, but with, you know, they should build connections with the community and stuff like that. I feel like they should look out for what's best for the community, and they should know when to be a cop and when to be a human, or a chief and when to be human. I feel like they should show empathy when it comes to certain things. You know, I see a lot of kids dying, and the way that the police approach them is very aggressive. But at the end of the day, they're kids, and no matter what, no matter how old you are a kid at some point. You know what they're going through. Not in all the cases, but you know what they're going through. And everybody makes mistakes, but I feel like we should have somebody that knows how to wear both their badge and their heart.
Thank you, Heaven. That's very good. Thanks so much.
Gary, we've got another add to the chat. It says someone who will have a commitment to Rochester and not use this as a way to build a resume.
Okay.
Before we go on to the next question, I have something else in the chat that I want to throw out, but once we're after this question.
Okay. Any other qualities, characteristics, skills you think are necessary for the next chief? Mute myself for a second.
Okay, Diallo, is his hand up? Go ahead, Diallo.
And we can't see you, but you're muted if you didn't know.
There you go.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Hello. Can you see?
Hey there.
Hi, I'm Naya Shabazz speaking. I'm under this Zoom
Yeah.
call. First, I would like to acknowledge, I believe what the youth said, her name was Heaven.
Mhm.
Heaven, you made some really great points, and I'm gonna reiterate some of that. And what stood out to me, what she touched on, is when a police officer needs to learn how to be a police officer and a human being, right? And in our community, we've seen tons of things happen over the past 2 years with violence from RPD, from a girl being handcuffed and detained, a baby girl being pepper sprayed, and 5 murders that occurred in our city in a very, very short time span. And the problem is we are seeing, I believe, through a lens of not a human lens. And it goes back to the Constitution, where Black people are viewed as 3/5 of a human. And the police chief, him or her, needs to have a humane body, a bone in their body, compassion. The next police chief needs to be connected to the community. And even if we can put a stipulation in actually living in our city, because a lot of times these police officers, they don't live in our city and they don't connect to our city. So that's where it relies at. And that's where those building relationships is very important, relating to the community. If you see a police chief that enters his home or his neighborhood, you'll feel more comfortable. And
Sure.
those are the qualities that our next police chief, him or her, should have. And I really want to touch on, like someone said, being in Rochester for the longevity and not just to build up your resume. The young lady haven't spoke about the rate of our youth, the condition of our youth today. So a lot of things need to be changed, and that's where we need to start with the police chief. And I appreciate these acknowledgements, and I appreciate these efforts, and I actually hope that what everybody is saying will be actually implemented into choosing the next police chief.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Now, someone has their hand up, and I don't know how to pronounce that name.
Hi, hello. My name is Nyala Dumas, and I'm here with my mother, Helen Dumas.
Okay.
Hi. So, to piggyback off what the sister just said, who spoke right before me, we're hoping, we live in the 19th ward, that it'll be a police chief who's going to be revolutionary rather than reactionary. Someone who's willing to reform or overhaul the system that's in place that we know doesn't work. You know, someone who's willing to say, okay, maybe police officers need more training before they're sent into these situations like what we had with Daniel Prude, and you have this horrific outcome. Someone who's willing to be accountable and transparent, and also hold their officers under their command to the same standard. Yes. You know, because too many times it's, you know, the narrative we first hear is the narrative that protects the officer. And we want to see that, as you mentioned, someone earlier mentioned the situation currently with Amir Locke in Minnesota. You know, initially the narrative that came out right away, the police chief supported the narrative of the officers that were on the scene. And then we start to see all of these truths being revealed. And so the main issue we're concerned about is accountability, transparency, and none of that proactive policing. As the other lady mentioned, you know, policing is not always what's needed in certain situations.
No, not at all.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. That's helpful.
And if we could have a society where police are not needed, that's the society I'd like to live in. This system was created off of criminalizing Black bodies. So thank you.
Thank you.
Our joiner has their hand up.
Yes, I'm hoping that the new police chief first assignment is to restore the relationship with the youth, with the uproar that is going on in our community with our youth, and the titles of animal and, you know, all the different stereotypes of why this the rise in the violence with youth. The acknowledgement of the police chief of 18 months of COVID, that these children did watch the horrifics of Daniel Prude, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. And we can label it mental health, we can label it social emotional. There has been failure by all adults on all levels for the youth. They sat home and watched this happen. They sat home and watched cities burn down. They believe that truths were told to them. The things that we have told them as adults in historically are not truth. They are reacting and rebelling by fighting the law. And if his first mission, forget the adults, if his first mission is not to restore, revive, and rebuild a relationship that children will again respect the people who wear that uniform and see them as an asset and not an adversary, then we will be back here again in 2 or 3, 4 years. The children are our future. If we save them, we save ourselves. And I've been saying that for the last 3 years. If the first couple of months is not for him to visit the schools, all of the schools, not the suburban schools, the city schools, and allow these kids to be able to trust and see authenticity in his eyes or her eyes and know that this is not someone who wants to hurt you, then we're back here again. And I just hope that's a part of the itinerary and the mission moving forward. Whoever is chosen needs to be very aware of youth development, encouragement, trauma, damage, and to be real, just say, we messed up. Tell me how we can fix it. Because we all make all of these assessments and analysts and determinations and plans and never, and I applaud Isaiah Santiago for saying what he said. We have to stop coming up with plans for these kids. They are not knowledgeable. They know more than we want to accept. They were sitting home and watching all of this unfold just like we were. And they're angry because we're not asking them, we're telling them, and we've been telling them, and that's a mistake. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gary, there's someone in the chat added, I agree with a comment in the chat regarding the need for someone who is not interested in the position as a career ladder. I also feel the ability to communicate effectively with the community and to have the strength of character to speak truth and to resist political pressure to conform to any particular point of view. And I also, there's another comment. Can we draw a connection? The next chief should work closely with the school district superintendent to work with the youth.
Great.
And so that's the other comment.
Thank you,
Mrs.
Barbara.
Thompson is, her hand up is. So go
Just
ahead.
as I was chewing a carrot, excuse me, please. First of all, I appreciate the conversational nature of tonight's forum. And someone just spoke to what I was going to say. One thing I was going to say, which is, I hear somebody's background.
If you're not talking, could you mute? Thank you, whoever did that. Go ahead, Ms. Thompson.
I really hope that the search committee for the chief does a good job in checking her background, making sure that she has a track record, not just what looks good on paper, but really checking to make sure that she has the courage and the fortitude to stand up to institutions and people of influence, and will do the right thing regardless of whatever pressure comes her way. Particularly, I hope that she will be someone who will do right when it comes to the Locust Club. Right now, I think the Locust Club, the police union, has an inordinate amount of power. And I think the police chief is going to have to set an example of an appropriate relationship with the Locust Club so that they are not calling the shots and they're not molding the behavior of police officers. So it's going to be someone, I hope the search committee will do its homework, make sure they check the communities that she has been a chief in or she has worked in, and make sure that she has a track record that will hold up well when she comes to Rochester. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Other perspectives?
Mary has her hand up. Mary, you're muted.
I'd like to see a chief that knows how to work with the drug world and is willing to take down the drug world, which has destroyed so many of our young men
Thank you.
and is behind a lot of the violence. Can I ask you one question? You were a chief, you said. What is the purpose of no knock? Why would they do a no knock?
Well, it's kind of beyond the scope of what, for this discussion. There's like legal standards, and I don't want to get into all of that. But generally, the idea is that it's safer for the officers to do a no knock, and there's really no evidence of that. But that's kind of what the gist of it is. So to enter a building with a warrant without knocking on the door and announcing your presence. So yeah. Thank you. All right, Mary. Other perspectives? I see there's a note from CJ.
Oh.
Yeah, that's me, Carmen Jones, maybe. But hello,
Yep,
everyone.
that's it.
Okay.
Carmen.
So my name is Carmen Jones, and I am the Community Center Manager for Recreation and Human Services here at the Willie Lightfoot Art Center, which was formerly known as Flint Street Art Center. And I am looking for a skill of just being present with our youth here at the Art Center. And not just this one, but because we're on this side of town, specifically this one, but more so in two forms, as the chief and then as a voluntary staff member or a person who will come in and just give back time to show a different side to our youth. From this interaction, the chief will be able to gain a sense of who they are working with in the community, the youth and their families, along with the staff members. But also it will let the youth understand that just because the uniform is on a person doesn't dictate exactly who they are.
Right.
It shows a different side as well. In our art centers, we have youth councils where our youth can range from as young as 9 years old and up to voice opinions, concerns, implement programs, community service projects, so forth. But this would be a great way that the chief can start building connections internally with us, with young kids as young as 5 years old, and move forward. My colleague, Mike Giorgetti, is also on the call as well. He may want to just nod his head in agreement or give, his own comments, but that's what I would like to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. If I could ask a question, Carmen. So what age do do you service there? So you said as young as 5 and as old, I'm assuming as old as 17?
Nope, it's old as infinity.
Okay, great.
So to adulthood.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And Michael, do you want to say anything?
No, I agree totally with Carmen on that. You know, to be able to get any officer, especially the chief, to be able to come in and relate with our youth, our adults, even to sit down and have conversations in the centers would be a huge step to connecting the community with RPD. And I think, and I agree with a lot of people on here saying that we definitely got to connect our community with the RPD, which would definitely bridge some of those gaps that need to be addressed. And, you know, starting with the youth is always our first look, because, you know, our youth are our future, and, you know, we got to mold that. So I 100% agree with Carmen, and I definitely agree with some of the other comments going on today.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Ms. Dumas has her hand up.
Hi, sorry, this is Helen Dumas again. I really liked what Carmen Jones and the other gentlemen were just saying about having RPD or the new chief working with the youth, and sometimes on a voluntary basis. One example it brought to mind was that I didn't grow up in Rochester. I grew up in the Southern Tier. But when I was coming up, we used to have like Officer Friendly come in and do bicycle safety checks and show us how to use hand signals. And, you know, police officers weren't always seen just as someone who you had to fear or someone who only came when there was something terrible happening. You know, they helped get your cat out of trees with the Officer Friendly firemen. You know, it's just,
Right.
I would like to see that type of community police work again. And this person have a real feel for, you know, getting to know the people in the area that you work with.
Great.
Great. Joni?
Hi, my name's Joni. I live in Cornhill. I agree with what everybody says about community policing and making the connections. I think that's so important, and supporting and helping our youth. But I also realize that one person, the police chief, can't do it all, and he's got to do it through his officers. So I also think that what we're looking for in a police chief is someone that can not only gain the trust of the community, but has to have the trust and the cooperation of his officers. So I would like to see a track record of someone who has been able to work with both community and his officers to achieve these goals.
Good point. Very good point.
James Thompson?
Hi, I would like to see a police chief who's able to see beyond the bad parts of police culture. Police need to be able to work together. They need to be able to have camaraderie, but they don't need to have a culture that denies, as has been said, the humanity of people. And there should not be excuses when something happens. For example, with Daniel Prude, when he wasn't given a blanket, he was naked in the street, and other examples that have been brought out. The police should be a friend of persons who live in the city. However, I think the police chief should also be using every opportunity to have other personnel besides police who are trained more thoroughly in some areas do the work. Of course, we're working on this with things like PIC team with mental health, but we need more. We need to really transition strongly to do that. I think police have been militarized over the past few decades, especially more recently. And if that's the direction they want to go in, there is a certain very minimalized need for that. Very few crime things are violent that the police respond to. So the things that aren't really violent crime, maybe they're serious specialists who could do that. But in the meantime, get as many people to go along with police, mental health experts, people from the community, particularly maybe people who aren't degreed, but who have community experience and know how to bring down situations of possible violence. We need the police chief needs to help orchestrate working with the community to bring these resources to the fore from the community. And please work with the Police Accountability Board to give them information as needed. And all of this will help to create trust in the police. And we'll realize that even though police are transitioning to becoming something else and becoming smaller, that it'll be a good thing. And just as in the environment, we change from gas to natural fuel or the sun, we move from policing, which, as you know, started as slave patrols, to community, to the community living and being healthy on its own. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a couple of comments. Hopefully one characteristic is that they have a servant leader mindset. Another comment, should we be discussing working with annual in-service training of existing officers and as new officers go through the academy with what the last speaker was stating pertaining to training and policies? Another comment, the chief needs to have a firm grasp on the history of policing in the US and the fact that it was instituted for the purpose of catching enslaved Black people. She needs to have a demonstrated understanding of how policing has evolved over the decades, changing to oppress Blacks, even as Black people have made civil rights gains. Somebody wrote here, former Chief Laron Singletary and Western New York Noble, National Organization for Black Law Enforcement Executives, were interacting and did participate in an abundance of events. Okay, so this is kind of a note to folks. I don't know that it's a comment. He's just commenting that the Facebook page stays active and that things have stopped recently, but that doesn't sound like a comment on the police chief. Yep. So that's a general comment here.
Great. Thank you for that.
And Ms. Helen Dumas has her hand up.
Sorry, I had one question because I just came across this kind of by accident, and I wondered if you could just quickly share what the next steps are after this. I know you're doing these sessions in each quadrant, the last one being, I think, the Northeast and the 10th.
That's correct. And so, yeah, so the next steps are, we're still doing some other group meetings as well. And then we're going to take all that information from those meetings and synthesize it down, and hopefully it'll fit in a brochure that we use to advertise to the population of folks who might be interested in being a police chief in Rochester. And so it's the development of the brochure, which typically is about 1,800 to 2,000 characters. So we really have to just distill it down so that we capture many of these thoughts and ideas in that brochure, so that prospective candidates will know what to expect when they show up in Rochester.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Gary, I don't know if this is true, but given that you're here and you're leading this search for us, I think as well, personally, I'm imagining that this insight that you're hearing from folks, this qualitative insight, is going to be really powerful as you engage with prospects to really get if they're going to fit here. So I don't want to just leave it to that, because you're leading the search personally, and you'll be able to help us find the right person who's going to fit.
Exactly.
I like to think.
And that's the other piece. It is. So we've talked about qualities, skills, and characteristics. So let's talk about what the next chief needs to accomplish for you guys to think they were successful. So what do you envision the next chief doing that you see, you go, okay, the chief did this, and I'm pretty happy with that. So what does success look like for you guys and gals? Mr. Thompson, your hand's up.
Yes. Well, for one thing, actually getting a police contract with the Locust Club would be helpful. A renewed one. It really looks at things in a more well-rounded way, and sees police is fair in the way police are investigated.
Right.
That works with the PAB and that takes into consideration some of the things that have happened over this past year and over the past few decades. So that would be a really important thing for me.
Great. And I will just say on that note, Mr. Thompson, is that can't all be on the police chief, because the way the laws are written in New York, many of the laws are deferential to labor, right? And the police employees are part of that labor force that are governed by those rules and regulations and laws. So yeah, but I do agree. There needs to be a meeting of the minds where things can improve and take shape and change. And some of the stuff that prevents that oftentimes in cities is the current labor contract. So I do get what you're saying.
Okay.
Isaiah has his hand up.
I kind of already touched on it in the first comment that I said, but really being able to connect back with the young people in the community, which will really bring down our violence. If we can get that connection back together, and again, like I said in the beginning, revitalize that trust between our police and our community. I think that will be good enough, for one person to get done, is really build back that connection. And really, once that connection is back and that trust is back, I think it was a lot of the issues that we have in our community. And also being able to change some policies that are clearly not working out.
Is he broken up for everybody else too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Isaiah, we didn't catch much of that. And we got a little bit of the beginning, not much of the back part. If you want to put it in the chat, that might be helpful, because your internet was kind of in and out.
In the chat, there's a couple of other things, Gary, that says reduction in homicides and violence is a comment. Restoration of public confidence and understanding of how the community and police work together for the good of the community. And another says it would be helpful to have a police officer or someone from RPD to contributing to the discussion, which we are as well. So maybe we can just comment that we're also listening to the RPD. They're very active in this as well.
Right. They are, and we have reached out to RPD and folks inside the PD and having those conversations. And they're also providing input through the survey as well. And so I think the subsequent conversations are the ones that are going to be really important, right? Because we know what everyone's going to have a perspective on what they need the chief to do, and got to meet somewhere in the middle and make sure that we find someone that can actually do the job and be able to bridge the gap between PD and community. Other things that look like success for everyone? What success look like for other folks?
Joni?
I think, we've talked a lot about community policing and the need for all these connections, but I think what would make it look successful if that community policing was very visible. So things like a positive presence of officers in schools, maybe neighborhood walking patrols in neighborhoods, something so that it's very visible to people in the communities that the officers are trying to get to know their neighborhoods and their communities, get to know the neighborhood associations. I think the more visible it is, the more successful it will be.
I agree. And I just want to point out, someone in the chat early on said, something about that the police aren't in the schools anymore because the district didn't want them in the schools, or something to that effect. Did I read that right, Barbara?
I'm trying to keep up with the chat myself.
Right. So I think that they were, and that's pretty common across the country during the protest after George Floyd's murder. A lot of cities, especially metropolitan cities, had the police come out of the schools because people didn't want the police in the schools because there's a sense of distrust because of what's happened in the national events, and to a smaller degree to what's happened locally. And I know that's different for Rochester because you guys had your own events. So I did see that in the chat.
And Helen Dumas added, no, thank you, no more police in the schools. So that sentiment is expressed here.
Right. So, but being visible in the community and doing other things in the community where all parts of the community can interact with the police in a meaningful way, I think, and I agree with you, Joni, that's the way to go. So thank you for that.
Mary Coffey has her hand up.
I was going to, Gary just said what I was going to say. It was the people who said, we don't want the police in our schools. And actually the schools now, I think the teachers are asking for them to come back, but they don't want them. Again, we have to get our schools, and we've got to all work together. We can't just hammer on one thing. We got to hammer on a lot of things. So
I'm sure there's school board meetings for that, right?
Yeah.
And other venues for those other things you're talking about, Mary.
Yeah.
I agree. It's going to take a joint effort to change the dynamics of any community. Yeah. So thank you for that.
The police did not leave the city schools. They were told to leave. So
right. Thank you for that clarification. Other perspectives on?
I don't know if we can have it both ways with that. We talk about we want the community to get engaged with the police and build up trust. What better way than to do it with a police officer in the school district? I think that we can't talk out of both sides of our mouths. I think that, we can't. I mean, police officers in the schools, like somebody said before, didn't ask to leave, they were told to leave. Now, I understand the circumstances that many people have said why they felt they should. Mm-hmm. But if we're going to start fresh with a new police chief, then let's start fresh all the way around. And let's look at that again, because I think that in my experience with the schools, the police officers and the students got to know each other, they liked each other, they waved to this officer. There was a sense of safety with the police officer being there. I don't know if that's holds true now. And I think that it does allow a police officer to get to know students, and kids get to see who a police officer is, and they build that trust. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. That makes sense.
Helen Dumas has her hand up.
Hi, this is in regards to why I said no police in the schools. We do want interactions with the youth, but not police patrolling the hallways and policing the students. If there are problems with the student body, those should be addressed through the administrators, the parents, guidance counselors. There are other programs and departments in place that should be able to work with the youth and solve conflicts in the school. And I just feel that they're already going through metal detectors and they're having their bags scanned and their phones taken, and then you have police patrolling the halls. It's part of the school to prison pipeline. That's why I'm adverse to it. And I feel, once again, that's a whole separate issue why I think we need more community schools. But the bigger problem is, we want them to have positive interactions with police, but we don't want the police physically always on the campus of the schools.
Appreciate that perspective.
Great. There's a comment. There's a comment here, Gary, that says we need humane, compassionate, and empathetic police who act like humans first. And then there's some other comments here. Police and student engage in conversations off rather than metal detectors on sports and things. So there's a lot of interesting conversation happening in the chat. I just want to make sure I'm grabbing. If I don't grab a comment that you want to make sure Gary hears in our search, please feel free to jump back in. There's a lot of conversation, which is good, and I'm glad to see the.
And just know that at the end of each one of these sessions, I'm going through and looking at the comments and copying them to a Word document. So I capture those as well. Okay. So thank you. So if hearing no one else about what the chief needs to be accomplished to be successful, I want to ask, what else do you want Mayor Evans to consider when he nominates the next police chief that you haven't already talked about?
Heaven?
Hi. I have like two things to say. One was for what I want them to accomplish, and the other thing is about Mayor Evans. Something that I would like them to accomplish is a drop or like no death rates due to the trust that was built, like them building those connections and seeing the kids the youth off the street. You know, they can set up programs to train them or show them, you know, a day in the you know, the police station, whatever you want to call it. And
Like a youth academy?
yeah, I'm also a part of one. But you know, I would like to see a crime rate drop, and them really engaging with the community, not only the youth but the adults. And for Mayor Evans, you said, what do we want him to consider?
Yes.
Right. I would say for him to consider the fact that whoever he selects, she or she would be our future. You know, they're going to be setting the new foundation for our city for all of this, and just to really take that into consideration and choose who's best for our community.
Great. Thank you, Heaven. Appreciate that.
We've got a comment in the chat. Please make sure the chief is a city of Rochester resident. And so that's another comment.
Okay.
On the line, and then Tom Pistecki has his hand up.
Sure. Thank you very much. So I'd like Mayor Evers to consider hiring from within our community. I think it eliminates the need for a learning curve, a period of reorganizing. It brings somebody that is familiar with the officers, their many strengths, their many weaknesses, and it is familiar with the programs, the ongoing current programs in Rochester regarding safety. And I think it'd be something to consider that we probably have some good candidates right here locally. And I'll make one more other comment. I think maybe Mayor Evans should be reaching out to our universities, our high schools, and even our grade schools, asking these questions that you're asking, Mr. Peterson. What do they want? I think we have some younger people on this call today, but gosh, us old folks, we need some young blood giving some young ideas. So that's my my two thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
BJ Scanlon has his hand up.
Hi, thank you. One thing that I was considering that I think would be helpful for the community is when the top candidates get narrowed down, that prior to the selection, they be made public and have a presentation or several sessions like this where they're able to meet with and talk with the community. I think it eliminates some potential issues where someone is named after being selected and then the community does their research and finds out something that could be potentially harmful in their background, that eliminates one of the possibilities of having some maybe some backstepping after we've selected someone. And I think if people are going to be looking at taking a position of this caliber and having to lead in our police department and work with our community, they should be willing to meet with folks even prior to it. And I know that for some folks that might be a difficult decision to make because they may not have exposed to their current employer that they're applying, and there may be other HR considerations. But I would think from my perspective that would be an important piece that the community and other groups would be able to meet with and hear presentations from potential candidates when they're narrowed down to like a top 3.
Great, thank you for that. And on the, I don't disagree, but I will say that if there's something in their backgrounds, that's a problem, it's my fault. And so I'll be accountable for that. And I do the research, I look at the social media, I look at all the news articles that are out there, and then check references and all that type of stuff. But I don't have the connections like someone may be with a particular group in Rochester, and this person may be in a particular city, that there's that connection. So that stuff would be helpful. And so I do appreciate that, BJ. Thank you.
There's a couple of comments, Gary. This one says, police chief keeping their officers engaged with the community with everything happening in the country and the world. Being a police officer is a very difficult job to have. Mentally takes a toll on the officers. Generally speaking, officers are dealing with individuals and people on their worst days. And then there's another comment. Success from the police chief to me would mean implementing policies around police training, making it longer and more culturally sensitive and inclusive, and supporting the end of qualified immunity. We've got an agreement about another forum. And then another comment, consider bringing back the Citizen Police Academy.
Okay.
And that's
Great.
the comment.
Thank you for all those comments. That's very helpful. That really adds value to this session. So thank you. Other comments or perspectives on what we want Mayor Evans to consider? Anything else? Or if there's no hearing from no one else on that, okay, we got Diallo's plate.
Yes, greetings, and I'll try to make this short.
No problem.
I think the connections that the police chief has, either internationally and more than likely more germane and probably more practical, is national connections between cities, because every American city is experiencing somewhat the same issues under the system we have. We'll keep that comment kind of generic. So there is an organization called the International Association of Police Chiefs, or something similar to that, or Chiefs of Police. Forgive the order, which I may potentially got that wrong. But I think membership in that organization would be helpful. I'm sure you've heard, in these different groups over the past week or so, probably heard that there was 10-year-old Naila that was arrested, put in cuffs, person of African descent, on 104, right around, Clinton area. And so the international police, chiefs of police, what have you, they actually have some guidelines for policies and laws that actually can be implemented for a situation like that. And it seems to me that there's a lot of solutions that exist on a national, perhaps international level, that an association like that, if we have a chief of police that's really tapping into that, and he has, colleagues that are involved with that, there may be a lot of great ideas that, already exist that we don't need to, reinvent the wheel to obtain. So it seems to me that organization like that is almost a mentoring collegial organization that provides some of the ideas, the solutions to problems we presently have.
Thank you. And if I'll just make a brief comment on that, there are a number of organizations other than IACP that help inform police executives throughout the nation. And I know that because I'm a member of some of them, and including the IACP, but there's also the Police Executive Research Forum, the National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives, the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Executives, the Hispanic Command Officers Association, the Major City Police Chiefs Association. All these different groups have vast resources that folks can tap into and learn more about best practices and ways to engage the community. There's a lot of resources out there for that. And then in academia, there's even more. So I'll leave it at that. Just wanted to comment on that. Thank you for that comment. That was a good segue into me talking about that. And we also advertise for the position with those groups as well. When we make the position profile into a brochure, we pay to have that on their website so that folks that are in those associations have an opportunity to view the position.
Gary, there's another comment here too. Consider a chief that smiles more than frowns, also has a great sense of humor to help with creating a team with a high work morale and the natural instinct to want to be in the community from the heart versus it just being their job.
Yeah, that's good.
And Helen Dumas has her hand up.
Hi, yeah, so just again, to kind of piggyback off the last comment, when you look at, because I'm assuming that you, with your background as a police chief and that you do this work of like trying to fill these positions, can you give us an example of a police chief that is meeting some of the things you're hearing from us? And an example, because too many times we see the bad cases and we see the, tragedies. Where is there an example in our country that you're aware of where there's someone who seems to be getting it right? And then in the essence of not reinventing the wheel or, working smarter, not harder, what could we take away from that person when trying to find our own police chief? Is that someone who could have some input or multiple people?
Right. So I'll just tell you all right now that everything we're asking for in the police chief, you're not going to get, because nobody is all that one person, right? There are some skills, some attributes, some characteristics, some experiences that they're going to have, and some that they're not going to have. And so I think it's really important that when I look at candidates, I look at how open-minded they are, how change-oriented they are. So people that are open-minded and open to change do a lot better job at assimilating into a community, learning the culture of the community and the culture of the department, whether it's good or bad. And if it's bad, they have the skills to change the culture inside the department. And if it's good, they build on it. And same with the community. They build programs that help advance the community and build trust. And so when you said someone who's done really well in the community, I thought about Chief Thompson, who not recently, it's been a couple of years now, retired from Camden County, New Jersey. And they work in a de-escalation program where they had a guy that had a knife and was confronted the police and basically walked the police down. He was trying to get shot by the police, right? Mental health crisis. And this is before the development of alternate response units. And those cops walked backwards 4 city blocks and didn't shoot this guy. And finally, when he realized he wasn't going to be shot, he gave up. And both of those guys got a medal. So I think encouraging that kind of conduct and then rewarding it and making that part of your department's culture. So that's someone like Chief Thompson, right? I think of him. I think of Bill Scott in San Francisco, who is dealing with a consent decree and doing all the things necessary to deal with the consent decree. But when the prosecutor goes overboard and they're withholding information from the police, he stands up for his police officers and says, okay, you're not cooperating with us. We're not gonna share the information we were already sharing because you're being dishonest. So I think there has to be a balance between those where you're working in the interest of the community and you're making sure that your officers are doing the right thing and holding them accountable when they do something that's inappropriate, outside of policy, or illegal. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So those are my questions that I had for this group for tonight. And at this point, we still have a few minutes left. I'm happy to hear other perspectives, or hang on and wait for people to talk about what's in the talk about the chat, or talk about anything else you want to talk about related to the police chief search, and qualities, characteristics, opportunities, and challenges that the new chief's going to face. That would be helpful too. Thank you.
There's a comment here, Gary. Are we looking at candidates who manage cities the size of Rochester with similar issues and are trending with successes, i.e. turning things around? Cross-referencing criteria with the pool of candidates, and assess candidate eligibility from there. So I think that's more of a comment on or a question on how are we doing the search?
Right.
And then there's a comment, Mayor Malik should recognize and applaud the good cops, promote them, weed out the bad ones, and incentivizing getting rid of guns is another comment in the chat.
Great.
And Mary has her hand up. Mary, you're on mute.
Mary, you're on mute.
I'm wondering how hard it's even going to be to get anybody to want to be chief. Our police were way down in numbers. A lot of retired, a lot are not applying for the job.
Well, and you're talking about police officers. Police officers and police chiefs are two different dynamics, because when you're trying to hire 60 police officers, for example, you need a pool of 6,000 police officers. When you're trying to hire police chiefs, people that have already proven themselves at the executive level, presumably, even though that pool, granted, over the past couple of years has dwindled, because there's been a lot of folks retiring, a lot of folks moving up and taking jobs across departments. So I would say it's not going to be easy. This is going to be a hard search. Rochester has significant challenges and opportunities to do well. So it's not going to be easy, but it's not something that's insurmountable.
And there's a strong group that doesn't want them at all. So I just hope we can get someone that's willing to take on the job and do a good job.
Great. Thank you for that. Me too. Anyone else have another perspective they want to share? Okay, so does anyone want to say anything else before we go?
Gary, this is the first time we've worked with you as a city. Is that correct? Because I'm new to the administration.
That is correct.
And so I don't know, do other searches use this same process? Do you know, or is this your?
Yeah, so some firms use a similar process. I think we do more engagement than most, because I was a police chief. I was engaged in my community, and I really feel that the community should have a significant voice in these type of searches, since we're finding people to be your police chief. Not just the police chief of the department, but the police chief who's going to represent your community and create policies, procedures, initiatives that impact the community. And so we want to hear your voice, and we like to find people that also want to hear your voice.
And Diallo has his hand up.
Oh, yes, hi. It's me this time. I have a question for Mr. Geary. Are you from this city? Are you from Rochester, guys?
I'm not.
Okay, so I would like to know, do you have any prior knowledge about our city besides jumping on this call? Do you have any prior knowledge about the things that have occurred in the atrocities, a lot of atrocities that have occurred throughout our city within the last 2 years? I would like to know if you have any connections to the community itself,
Right.
Because I also think that is a very important key point and role for you to also have connections in community relations with this community itself for you to be able to choose, and seek the right chief.
Right.
And if you don't, I think you kind of touch base on it. In your prior city, did
Right.
you have good relationships with the community in that city?
Yeah, of course I did. Yes, I did. And so to your question, I have never done work for Rochester. I do know several people that work for Rochester. I had met someone in HR before. I had worked with Dr. Alexander on a project. I had him, he was a previous deputy mayor in Rochester, and I had him help me on a project in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And he's no longer the deputy mayor, but I do know him. And so I'm more connected to just the New York region, because I've done a lot of searches in New York. I don't know if you were here when I said that, but I've done searches in Albany, Syracuse, Beacon, Long Beach, and currently the MTA. So I do have that New York experience, and New York's kind of a different, from an HR standpoint, it's different than the rest of the country. There's a few other states like New York, but it's not an easy place to do a search. And I was connected to the community that I worked in. And I worked at one department for 26 years and some change, and kind of rose through the ranks and became a chief my last 4 years or so.
So Gary, did you search for and find the current chief in Syracuse?
I did, and Albany, and Long Beach, and I've also done, I didn't say this earlier because I want to be a braggart, but I did do the Dallas police chief, Kansas City, Missouri, San Francisco, Sacramento, Raleigh, North Carolina, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, recently Grand Rapids, Michigan again, Lansing, Michigan. So done over 40 searches in the past few years, just in this space. Most search firms do all types of government searches. They do city managers and finance directors and economic development directors. Our firm, we just do police executives. That's kind of our lane. So we stay in our lane. We see this as an opportunity to put great people in great organizations to help bridge the gap between police and community.
And there's another comment, Gary. We've had a run of a number of chiefs over the past 10 years. So I hope we can get it right this time with someone who's committed, invested in the safety and welfare of the community, and will stay around a while to see it come to fruition.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's another person who talks about chief tenure and what's the average these days, which is, I know you've got that.
It's not as high as you would want it to be, and it kind of runs concurrently with the elected officials and the if you're in the different forms of government, there's the mayor council form of government, and there's a city manager council form of government, where the strong mayor makes a decision. There's usually at 4-year terms. Some cities it's 2 terms and you're done. Other cities they can go on indefinitely. And city managers are at-will employees of the city council when you have a city manager form of government. And city managers' tenure is about 4 years. So the police chief's tenure is about 4 years. Same with the strong mayor form of government. It's right around 4 years. And earlier someone said something about having someone from inside the department. And I just want everyone to know that this is not just a search outside the department. This is a search inside the department too. So we want it to be a fair process, and internal candidates will be screened just like external candidates, and they're screened against the profile and each other, so that we make sure that we get the very best fit and the best qualified individual that's going to be able to do the things that we've talked about tonight, or at least some of them, right? Okay. Okay, any other perspectives? Heaven.
Oh, there's Heaven.
I just have one more thing to add. I think that we need to have a strong foundation that can bring control and discipline. But like I said before, that can also wear their heart and be human and not be afraid to get vulnerable with us as a community. And we need someone that will be able to detect, protect, and adapt to our situations, to our problems, and be able to change them. So yeah.
Thank you. You know, and I appreciate that. And I will just say that, and I think someone else has said this earlier, this is, you know, the issues that face Rochester are not just going to be solved by whoever's the next police chief. This is, you know, this is a community that is in a little bit of turmoil, and you know, some of it's revolving around the police chief search, but there's a lot other factors that are involved in reducing crime and building relationships. And I do believe that police executives, police chiefs, and their staff needs to meet the community where they are and have that dialogue and conversations about what's happened in the past and how it can get better. But also the communities needs to show up at the meetings too, so that that dialogue can occur. You know, and you know, my philosophy is if they don't show up, you come back again, and you keep coming back until you get an audience and people will be willing to talk about the issues that impact them and can help make it a better community. And Marcia, your hand up. Marcia, are you trying to have your hand up? If you are, you're muted.
We can't have a community
Yeah.
Oh, you muted Marcia. Marcia, you remuted there. Oh, I wonder if she froze.
She kind of looks frozen.
Yeah. Gary, there was a note, and I wonder, I just think it may be worth reiterating for if you know someone who can't attend one of these sessions, there are other ways to give your input. And I think you had mentioned the survey. So
right.
Make sure we reiterate
Community input survey, which is on the city's website. It's a click and I think 6 or 7 questions. Feel free to fill that out. Most of it's check the box, and there's one narrative that we ask what you want the mayor to consider when he makes that appointment. And so please feel free to do that as well.
Great.
Anyone else have anything else before we go? We're pretty much at the end, and hearing. Let's see. I'm not hearing no one. I just want to thank everyone. Oh, there's Marcia back. Marcia, were you trying to get on? We were muted, and we couldn't hear you.
yeah, I think you froze, Marcia. There you go.
Yeah, I've been frozen for years. We cannot have a police chief who's going to be controlled by city council, by rumor, by people blaming him for things before they have all of the facts. We can't just have a mayor jump on the news against our police department. That's got to stop. Where we stop it, how you stop it, I have no idea. I'd be rich if I knew. But we can't allow this to happen in our city again. We got to find a way that will never, ever be allowed in our city again.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. All right. So I do think that we are near the end. I want to, on behalf of the city and Public Sector Search and Consulting, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight and sharing your particular perspective and view on the issues we've talked about tonight. It's very helpful, and I appreciate you guys, and it speaks well of your community. So many people are involved. So thank you and good night.